everyone, this is Nikki Regenball, and you are listening to Just One Bird's Opinion. It's been a pretty exciting week for me. I just finished my very first week of grad school. So the wrapping up of this week does feel like a good time to discuss in just a bit more detail about what I'm studying and how this first week went and what that exactly looked like. So, I am a brand new PhD student at the University of Toronto studying ecology and evolutionary biology. And while this is a big new step, jumping in right from my undergrad, this is also where I did my undergrad, so I am in a familiar place with some familiar faces, which definitely helps out in the transition rather than me starting in a brand new city and a brand new place. I at least kind of know my way around, which is definitely helpful. And I'm lucky enough to be working with a brand new professor who also just started this semester. So that's really helpful as well that we're starting at the same time and both had our exciting first week of school. And this professor is Dr. Selena Baines, who is super duper lovely and researches dispersal or animal movement, which is super duper cool. For me, it was really important to find a professor that I felt I would be compatible with and could build a nice rapport with. Because after all, I am going to be working with this person for at least the next 5 or so years. And I, of course, want that to be a pleasant 5 years, so I'm really happy to have found this in a supervisor. And I felt like it was a really good match right from the interview, so I really just could not be happier with it. And I'm happy that I'm working with a brand new prof because I feel like I might get a little bit more personal freedom when it comes to formulating my project than I feel that I might have working with a really established professor who's had a lab for a really long time. And this doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes professors, especially older professors who have been doing this for a long time, kind of want their students to stick to their projects more or less and kind of research their interests, which I would have been fine with doing for a year, of course, or 2 years maybe, but if I'm going to be spending 5+ years on something, I just want that to be something that I feel really excited and passionate about. So I'm really enjoying this freedom that it looks like I'll be having and just kind of exploring my own interests. So what is it that I'm studying that I'm so excited about? Well, that's still being formulated in terms of specifics, but loosely, I'm interested in how global change affects the dispersal of mutualistic and parasitic organisms. Wow, I just threw a lot of terms at you, so let's briefly kind of go through them and see what these mean. Global change is an umbrella term that refers to a whole bunch of things that are changing our planet. So that includes climate change, habitat loss, habitat degradation, nutrient imbalances, all of that is global change. And we know that these factors influence organisms and ecosystems in a variety of ways. We know that there's biodiversity loss and shifting range distributions of these species, and all sorts of things can happen. But I am personally particularly interested in symbiotic relationships, which are relationships between organisms where they are super duper close-knit, and these can be positive or negative relationships. Mutualisms are an example of a positive symbiotic relationship where both players or whatever organisms involved are all kind of benefiting in some way, shape, or form from this having this relationship and being closely involved. Whereas parasitism is the opposite, where one of them is really benefiting, but that is at the expense of the other. Symbiotic relationships are super cool because they are really close-knit and are often the backbones of ecosystems. So when these relationships change, they have really widespread and cascading effects on all of the other organisms that were in that ecosystem as well. So really important to research, really important to learn how they are going to change over time. And global change affects organisms differently. So there's increasingly different pressures for the organisms involved to change their behaviors. Maybe there's pressure for one organism in a mutualism to shift north, and one of them can't really shift north with climate change, so it's kind of staying, and there's this whole should I stay or should I go relationship between the draws of environmental pressures and the draws of that mutualism that are kind of maybe working against each other in some cases. So researching how these relationships might change in the future is super duper important. So while I'm still developing exactly what these research questions are going to look like, as of right now, I just think that it's a really cool topic and that there's room to do a lot of different things with. So that was very theoretical, but let's go through a little example that you may have already heard of, which is coral reefs and climate change. Coral reefs aren't actually just one organism. They are the product of a mutualism between two organisms, which is coral and this really special type of algae. So coral is actually an animal, and you might be thinking that does not look like an animal. Well, it's an animal because they don't actually make their own food, meaning that they need to get their food from an external source, and they really struggle doing that on their own. So this is where the algae comes in handy for them, because the algae are primary producers, which just means that they can make their own food for themselves with photosynthesis. So the coral lets the algae bind to it, which actually gives the coral reef their color, and in exchange, the algae will pass on some of the food that it's already producing for itself to the coral. Since the coral benefit from the food and nutrients that it's getting from the algae, and the algae benefit from the shelter it's getting from the coral, this is an example of a mutualistic relationship. But as global temperatures rise, the coral gets all stressed out, essentially, under these new environmental conditions, and the algae doesn't produce as much food. It's just not able to. So the coral kicks out the algae because it says, no, you cannot stay here rent-free. If I'm not getting all of the food that I'm supposed to be getting out of this relationship, I'm not going to continue housing you for really nothing. And when the temperatures stay high, they're not able to reestablish these relationships, which is why the issue of climate change and increasing temperatures and that kind of upward trend is so devastating for coral reefs. And this is what coral bleaching is, because when the algae are gone, since they're responsible for the color of coral reefs, they lose all their color and they become bleached. But besides just the change to color, unfortunately, without the help of their mutualistic algae, the coral is not able to get its own food. So it eventually kind of just starves to death and dies, and that's really bad and sad. But in addition to just the effects on the coral reefs itself, coral reefs are super important ecosystems. They're home to a slew of biodiversity. So the disruption of this mutualism due to climate change affects all other creatures that live there, and can have really cascading effects on food chains and biodiversity, and the cascade just continues going out as more and more organisms and species are impacted. And this is just one example of how global change affects symbiotic relationships. So overall, this is just a really interesting and important topic where there is just a bunch of room for research. So let's shift gears a bit. I just finished talking about what I'm interested in studying, but now let's talk about how this big first week of school went. Overall, I'd say very painless. I would say it actually went very well. I had my first lecture as a grad student, and all the other students and the prof seem to be super duper nice and friendly, and in general the course just seems interesting. It's a core ecology course, so we are going to cover a whole bunch of different topics and have the opportunity to present seminar style lectures to our peers, which is really cool. So I'm excited to see how that course kind of shapes up. And I've also had quite a few meetings already this week. One with the professor that I'm going to be a teaching assistant or TA for. And that's great because I already know this prof. I worked with her as an undergraduate student, and we are hopefully going to be working on publishing a manuscript together. That's in the works. So already know her, already have a great relationship with her, so I'm very excited to be her TA. And the course that I'm TAing for seems really cool too. I wish I had the opportunity to take it as an undergrad. It's all about conservation and biodiversity topics and just trying to get like a feel for all of the different, I don't want to say controversial kind of topics in conservation, and I feel like it's really important to be teaching undergrads about this, because if you're going to be entering a field of conservation biology or something of that nature, it's important to know all of the different aspects of it, and rather than the glamorized version, I guess. So I'm really excited to hear my students' thoughts throughout the semester, because I know we're going to cover a bunch of really interesting topics. So super excited for that. And I met with my supervisor for a little hello kind of introduction meeting, even though I did work with her over the summer. But it was nice just to kind of reconvene after not seeing each other for the fall. We talked about, I guess, expectations, a manuscript that I started working on over the summer, and we just kind of caught up, and it was really nice and smooth meeting. So I'm feeling pretty happy about how this week went, and I was definitely feeling a bit of back to school jitters at first, but I've been trying to work through those thoughts rather than spiraling into that line of thought where I'm convinced, oh no, my supervisor hates me or something like that, which there's no grounds to think that way. It's just how our minds work, which I think is something that a lot of students can relate to. But essentially I've been kind of challenging those thoughts and asking myself to dig a little bit deeper when I'm feeling anxious or nervous about something like the first week of school, and trying to figure out, okay, what exactly am I feeling anxious about? Is it because I don't want to do it? Do I not want to be here? Am I feeling like maybe this is not what I'm actually wanting to do? Is it because I'm not prepared, I have a presentation or a test and I actually just don't know the material or something like that and I need to study more or prepare more? Or is it just because I want to do a good job and I care about it and I care about the output? And this has actually brought a lot of comfort to me this week because I've been consistently reaffirming to myself that, yeah, actually I really, really do want to be here, and I'm just nervous because I want to do a good job. And that's okay, and kind of getting to that point where I've established to myself, I just want to do a good job and I just want to be here and, produce something that I'm proud of and make new friends and, build up a good relationship with my supervisor. That's something I can work with rather than it being something I'm not prepared and I don't want to be here. I can build my line of thought into something productive rather than destructive. So I feel like this has been a good tool this week. And after meeting with some other students in the department and getting situated, I feel like I'm already feeling much better and more in the swing of things for sure. So I would say a very successful first week of school. And I'm really excited to get fully into the swing of things and really start developing my research and getting into my class, and I TA for the first time next week. So there's a bunch of cool, new, exciting things that are going to be happening, and my department seems very sociable. It seems like there's a lot of events and seminars to attend and all sorts of things. So super excited to see how it's actually going to shape up and look like. These were my major updates this week, but I hope you continue following me on this journey. This is Just One Bird's Opinion, and thank you for listening.